Hey everyone, this is Tracy Friedlander. You're listening to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. Today on the show, I have Hunter Noack, pianist and creator of In a Landscape. I had the best time hearing about this project where Hunter takes a 9-foot Steinway to natural locations in national parks and plays concerts for people. I wanted to know about the nitty-gritty logistics of just pulling this off, how he raises the money for this expensive project, how he navigated doing something this daring and bold, and how he found support. Hunter has great advice about navigating your creative project, how to figure out if your project is right for you, navigating the grant writing process, and the super valuable piece on getting feedback from his audience that you're going to want to hear. I love how this project has evolved over time, and Hunter shares that story too. This part is so inspiring. You can find out more about In a Landscape and Hunter at inalandscape.com and his social channels at In a Landscape. The links are in the show notes. Before we get started, a couple of quick things. There are a few spots left in the Visibility Workshop, my 4-month program designed to take you from clueless and confused around social media and audience building to confidently growing your online community and audience. Do you ever wonder, what should I post online? Are you concerned you don't have enough to talk about? Do you secretly in the back of your mind think no one will actually care about your opinion, who you are, and what you have to say? Does being public on social media terrify you? Do you think social media has to take up your whole life if you do it and it's way too time consuming? I get it, and we will solve all of these concerns and so much more. Each participant will work on a visibility project over the 4 months, building consistent content around a specific intention you have for building your audience. This isn't just audience building for the sake of likes and follows. You're finding your future clients, students, and fans. Watch for live videos on my Facebook page and inside my Facebook group around discovering your unique visibility project and what that can look like. If you're interested in finding out if the Visibility Workshop is right for you, click the link in the show notes to book a call. I also want to thank Fix Music for sponsoring Crushing Classical Podcast. Fix is your online resource for high-quality, affordable sheet music. Fix is now offering business accounts for choruses, orchestras, libraries, churches, and universities. This includes volume discounts of up to 25%. They've partnered with FedEx to offer 2-day shipping at insanely low prices, even to Alaska and Hawaii. They continue to expand the catalog with everything from high-quality jazz method books to elegant hardcover Urtext editions and everything in between. They love their customers and are open to suggestions on what to carry, which they're more than thrilled to get. It's kind of like crowdsourcing their inventory. And as always, free shipping on all domestic orders. Use the link in the show notes to receive 10% off your first order. Let's get started. Hey, Hunter, thanks for joining me today on Crushing Classical.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad you're here because I love what you're doing. It's so unique, and I can't wait to for you to tell the story of it. So, and before I launch into like a bazillion questions that I have for you and like how you've created what you've created, why don't you explain in your words, because it will be better than if I do it, what you've created.
Sure. So I have an outdoor concert series called In a Landscape: Classical Music in the Wild. And essentially what we do is we take a 9-foot Steinway on a flatbed trailer, haul it behind a pickup truck, and go to spectacular and beautiful sites across Oregon, and sometimes Washington and California, state parks, national parks, ranches, farms, and we give classical music concerts, sometimes incorporating poetry or dance or other kind of performing arts. But we give the audience wireless headphones so they can listen to the live music and wander through the landscape. So the music can become more of a soundtrack to their experience of nature.
Wow, that's so amazing and like really powerful to take classical music and put it in a different context like that. Do you find that most of your audience members are not it's their first time with a classical music concert or?
Yeah, a big part of what we have done is we do a lot of concerts in rural areas, and so what we do is we have uh, tickets free for locals, and that allows us to have a pretty diverse crowd. Over the last 4 years, about 30% of our audience has never been to a classical music event. So we do have a lot of people, coming, classical music lovers that travel to come to these events and maybe explore places that they haven't been before.
Mhm.
But then we have a lot of people that are from these places that have a relationship with the landscape that are new to classical music.
That's amazing. So you're getting like lovers of two separate things, like and then like probably complete newbies, but like lovers of classical music who want to see this new experience, and then lovers of the landscape who also want to experience it in a new way. That's really neat. So how did you come up with this idea?
Well, I was inspired by the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, which during the Great Depression of the 1930s, through their federal music and theater projects, presented thousands of free concerts and plays in public lands. And I loved that idea. I loved the idea that art was accessible and for everyone. And I also liked that with a government stimulus plan, the arts were seen to be as important to the health of a society as the roads and post offices.
Mm.
So the very first year, I got a small grant to do a few concerts around Portland, Oregon, and so I performed at WPA sites like Timberline Lodge and other public parks. And that was really how that was the sort of the ethos behind it. But more practically, what I wanted to do was combine the two things that I love the most. I grew up in Central Oregon, hunting and fishing, and just spending a lot of time outdoors. But then, from the time I was 14, I went away to boarding school in Michigan, and then for the last 10 years before moving back to Oregon, I was in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and London. And kind of, I would come back for vacations, go hunting with my dad. And um, but I just didn't have that same kind of connection with the outdoors. So when I was back in Oregon, I fell in love with just, exploring, exploring the state again. And so at the beginning, I kind of wanted to just figure out a way to bring a piano to campgrounds
Hmm.
so that I could just play and practice and maybe play for people that were out there. So it was not so much, I guess, at the beginning. It was kind of a combination of that that idea of bringing art out to people, but mostly it was mostly it was just about me being able to combine those two things that I
Yeah.
love.
Yeah. So it started as a way to just, like you said, combine two things that you love, and then it's been evolving into something different. So that's actually what I already know about because we talked about it, and I can't wait to dive into what that ended up looking like and what it's still continuing to look like. So, but before we start going into that direction, I want to just ask a couple of logistical questions like,
Sure.
how in the world do you get a grand piano out into nature like that?
It's a good question. We So the first year we just worked with a moving company. We rented Steinways from the local Steinway dealer here in town,
Hmm.
and they delivered pianos. We chose sites that a truck could drive to.
Okay.
Um, and then the next year, when I wanted to take the project across the state and bring it to places like Fort Rock and the Alvord Desert and tops of mountains and places where there were no paved roads for miles and miles, the Steinway said, we love this project, but the dealer said we can't really take on that liability,
Right.
and also it was just like prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
So I had lunch with a a friend and supporter, Jordan Schnitzer, who really from the beginning was helped me kind of take this project from an idea to actually some a concert series. And I told him about this need to have a piano, and what I wanted to have the same piano that was in same piano that was in Carnegie Hall, same piano that was in all most major halls around the world, because I think it was like the theater, that drama of seeing a 9 foot Steinway out in these magnificent landscapes. I thought that that was important.
Yeah.
And so he uh, he bought a piano. He bought he said, "Yeah, go look for one." And I actually found one at the Apostolic Faith Church here in Portland. And so then the question was, how are we going to move it? And I'd been talking with friends and engineers for a year at least, trying to figure out how we could move this piano. Usually,
Mhm.
it takes at least 3 professional piano movers to tip the piano on its side, and pianos usually travel kind of on their side.
Yeah.
um, but we came up with a system where we used a series of hydraulic lifts to lift the piano up, take off the legs, and lower it down onto a cushy bed of foam,
Mhm.
and then kind of protect it that way so it travels on its belly. And this was something that like no piano technician or moving company was comfortable with, because it's just not done that way.
Right. Right.
So we had to take a little bit of a risk, and put transport the piano like that. So it lives on the trailer the whole summer. And we basically now we have a fancier trailer. So with the touch of a button, it the 1,000 pound piano is lifted up, and we just pop in the legs and then lower the lift down, and the lift disappears into the stage. So it's super slick now. But the first year we just had these like hand pump hydraulic lifts, and it's kind of a miracle that we would take it on these bumpy roads. We'd be in 100-degree heat one day, and then out on the coast in freezing fog the next day. And and the piano was resilient.
Wow.
It's kind of it's I these instruments they're made to tour, and they're built really incredibly well. So I think it speaks to the craftsmanship of the instrument, and also like if it's a big piano, and if it were a smaller piano, I think the wood would be shifting more. I mean, I don't really
Mm.
know, but I'm still sort of amazed at how it's been now 3 years of touring. We've done 83 concerts, and the piano is um, still, still working and sounds great.
That's amazing. And so probably there's people onlooking, right, who are like, "How can you do this?" You know, like,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
right? Like, because I know the size of these instruments, and in concert halls, often they're stored in these like little lockers that are perfectly humidified to the right percentage and like at the right temperature and all of these different things. And here you are, like you just said, taking it to all these extreme conditions, and amazing that you're proving that, yeah, it's possible and it can survive. And so, like, when you get to your destination, do you have to do a lot of tuning?
Yes. So we travel with a piano technician, Cameron Edens, and his job is to take care of the piano. So wherever we go, he spends 3 to 4 hours working on the piano. And usually usually the whole like tuning will shift up or down, and then in that, depending on the humidity and temperature. And so he's always working with a moving target. And
Yeah.
we do concerts in the evening, a couple hours before sunset, and so the piano changes, but from the time I start the concert to the time it's over. And so it's never perfect. And it does, the piano does experience some wear.
Mhm.
But I think it's worth the risk, and I think people are so appreciative that we take the risk, and but to have a professional technician travel with us is absolutely essential. We couldn't do it. I mean, the piano would just sound terrible
Right.
if we didn't have have that regular, consistent work
Is
every day.
is that stressful at times, like knowing how much it's changing and the unpredictability of it as a performer?
Um, I think, you know, it is a little bit stressful. Like if, if we're on a highway and we hit a bump,
Hmm.
or there's something that happens to the trailer, and I can't assess the piano immediately. We have to wait till we're at the concert site and we're setting up, and we go to a new place every single day. So it's if we discover at 11 o'clock in the morning that something happened to the piano, uh, I don't know what, it has to be fixed by the concert at 6 p.m. And so sometimes I have a little bit of anxiety if there's something that's happened in transit that I fear might have affected the piano. But luckily, I think because we've designed a system where the piano is pretty cozy in transit,
Hmm.
we haven't had that problem.
That's good. That's really good. So, like initially, when you started to tell, I've been talking to my audience about the concept of like when you start something new, and it's just it's in the idea phase, um, what that process is like when you start to share with people your vision, and how it can be at times really like I don't know, depressing or like discouraging if you talk to the wrong person and they're like, oh, you know, that's too expensive or that's not possible. Like, did you experience that when you initially started to tell people about your idea since it's such a huge undertaking? Like, what was that like when you started to tell people about it?
I think even from the beginning, people responded really positively to the idea of concerts being free, accessible, and connecting it with historic places and natural, beautiful settings.
Mm-hmm.
What I got the most kind of resistance from was the idea of taking a beautiful, expensive piano on the road. And so a lot of people wanted me to consider taking a smaller piano, taking an upright piano, taking an electric keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because if it was really just about playing music in these places, there are some really nice, high quality keyboards, or electric pianos that
Yeah.
have, I shouldn't say, yeah, electric pianos that are super advanced and have great sounds. Um, but they just don't have that. They're not. It's not an acoustic instrument.
Right.
And it would, of course, be a lot easier, a lot cheaper, a lot less risky to bring an electric instrument on the road. Um, and so there were many people that kind of were encouraging me to do that, just so that I could kind of do the do the project. Which, if just performing in nature was the ultimate goal, then I could have accomplished that with a keyboard. And so I sort of had to grapple with that. And I even I was seriously contemplating for one project down in Los Angeles. We were part of Desert X a couple, like in 2017, and I thought, maybe we could try a version with an electric piano.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and fortunately, my partner Thomas was like, no, just don't, hard no. Uh, and so to have people that that were part of creating that vision, and around me, and kind of consistently there to give feedback that made the project, I think, better, was incredibly valuable.
Yeah. To have people around you that were like, no, this is the vision. We're not changing it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, that's super valuable. And like you knew, but that it would be so much grander and so much more theatrical on top of the fact that it's always better just to have an acoustic instrument but also such a beautiful high quality one. So sticking to that vision is amazing, but in the face of when you're a founder and you're going, okay, I'm the one who's saying I'm doing this, I'm sure that's where all the value comes in, and having like, having Thomas and other people around you that were like, no, we're not compromising. This is how it's going. This is what it's going to look like. So
Yeah.
I think that's so great. That's such a great story. Because, it makes you think like as a founder for anything, you need to have some supporters to keep reminding you that of the real vision, even in the face of like when there's some certainly struggles around getting started. Like you said, you had to have numerous conversations for like a year about how are we going to transport this thing, and over those conversations it could be easy to kind of feel weakened at times, like when you're not finding the right solution.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think having that team of people, it really didn't feel like, I mean, it's kind of my project, but I mean, especially my Thomas and my parents who have been helping me realize projects and write grants since, for years and years and years.
Mm.
They were also so much a part of that first year in helping shape the vision. And I think if I think it was I think actually a lot of it was through the grant writing process, for which, when I wrote that first grant, I had a lot of help, mostly from my parents and Thomas. And uh, I think having to articulate it and write it down, like write down the project,
Yeah.
it it kind of fleshed out and made us all really commit to commit to a vision and commit to a project that even on paper, reading it back seemed viable and seemed like something worth doing.
Hmm.
And so we kind of had that piece of paper to go back to when there were questions like this. And yeah, and so, but yeah, I mean, you're totally right. That having people around made all the difference.
That is so valuable what you just said. I think everyone that's listening to this right now can learn something, because even if you're not writing a grant, if you have a vision for something, how powerful that is to write it down and be able to look at, this is the vision, this is the goal, this is what we're creating, and see how it is all worked out because you have it all written down. I mean, that's
Right.
even for something much smaller or something much more personal or something that's a business. I mean, obviously, businesses come up with business plans all the time, but you know, often musicians don't think of it in that way, when they're creating something new. And so it's like having that vision has got to be so fundamentally important. So in addition to having the people, so this is also great advice. So you said that grant writing wasn't necessarily new for you when you were starting this project. Is that right?
That's right. I had done written other grants and done other projects that I thought were going to be, kind of take off and be my career path. But I was successful with a lot of other grants and other projects, but they just didn't end up having the same life that this one has happened to have.
Mm-hmm. But that's really great that you had that experience because, so many people, like, what advice would you have for someone who's brand new to starting to write grants and ask and, look for funding in that way?
Well, I'm a huge fan of grants. I think that's like free money and basically a great opportunity to be forced to articulate and realize, in your own mind, your dream projects.
Okay.
Uh, and so I love grants. I think one thing that's really problematic, that's like a habit for people that are writing grants and for like people that are creating grant questions, um, but especially those of us who are writing grants, is to write in language that's vague. And um, there's like this whole grant language that is sort of irritating to me. And so the way that I approached grants from the beginning, um, which is, I mean, also, I can't really take credit for this because it is entirely influenced by again my parents and Thomas. But it's to try and be as specific as possible and like be um, like write in an imaginative in an imaginative and like in an inspiring way that's not sort of dry and trying to conform to like use words like community building and I don't know. I mean, those words are helpful, but really, it's like your grant proposal should be a document that you love to read. It's like
Mm,
your I don't know. I think that being specific and also like and just doing it, applying for grants is a really valuable lesson. I mean, a lot of the grants we don't get, and we spend an enormous amount of time applying for grants.
hmm.
Um, now more than ever. But it's just the process and the challenge of answering answering questions about what you want to do forces you to think bigger and think about how you'll achieve those goals and work through all the problems. So yeah, grants have been. I mean, this project started with grants, and I I mean, I got a small grant, and then quickly, well, then I sort of expanded the project and then realized that I was, going to be way over budget, and that's when other people in the community started to step in and uh, and offer support in the many different ways that they could. For some people it was with money. For other people it was volunteering hours. For other people it was like even guest musicians saying that they would perform for next to nothing,
Mm,
just because people love when you do something that you want to do, and they
yeah.
want to support that. And I felt that, and I still feel that. And um but it's dependent on having something that people can trust, which is a vision and a plan to execute that vision.
That's so great. I want to speak quickly to the piece about writing a grant in a way that's not so vague and maybe using words that people expect to read in a grant, but maybe you're trying to say that like it's more of an enrollment process. In other words, you want the reader to go, "Wow, I really want this to happen." So you got to
Yeah,
figure out how to write in that way.
right. And yeah, I think that's a great point. And also, like, you know I think there I think not modifying your project to suit the needs of the grantor
Mm,
or the foundation, or there we can modify our projects to no end to sort of meet the needs of where the money's coming from.
yeah.
But I think the and it's important to be aware of those things. But I think the most important thing is to make sure that the core of the project is something that you are really excited about, because that's kind of the only way that that the project will translate, and
Mhm.
kind of come off the page.
It sounds like you need to, I mean, you could teach grant writing or, offer, at least at the very least, with this podcast. This advice is so valuable because musicians aren't uh, typically practicing writing, you know, once they're off into their, careers. It's a whole other, you know, I don't want to say talent because you can develop it, but a skill. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
and like we're not really trained to do that.
right.
I mean, we're trained how to practice music, and we're trained how to do a bunch of different things. But thinking about what you want to do. I think the other thing I was thinking about as it relates to grant writing is that uh, it's important to do things that and to come up with projects that will entertain yourself along the way.
Mm,
Um, so to create a project that you would want to go see, not something that's just out of the box for the sake of being out of the box, because we can all be endlessly creative,
right.
but to create something that you would see that on a list of, you know a calendar of events, and you'd be like, I want to do that.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that I think you can sort of check in with, and see if it's aligned with that kind of inner fire. Because if you really want to go to something, chances are that somebody else will really want to go to that same thing.
Yeah, well, that's so powerful, and I was going to talk to you about audience building about for this, and we'll talk about that some more a little later. But one of the things, like what you just said about that, is you're really putting yourself in the audience's shoes when you're thinking about it like that. And like for me, I heard about this and I was like, oh my God, I would want to go to that, right? Because um, that's what makes. I mean, obviously, as a creator when you're excited about if you would go to something, that's a totally different viewpoint from I just want to play this because I like this music. Like you're thinking about the audience. I mean, you put it perfectly because you said put yourself in the situation of finding out about this concert. Is that something you would want to go to? So that's really what that is putting yourself in the audience's shoes and going, I want to create something that, I would want to go to. So
Yeah,
that's really
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah,
I love that. So tell me about how, as you've continued on with this project, tell me about how it's evolved for you. Because I know, like, I think in any project where when you're at the first stage, you think, well, I would want to do this because it would be fun for me, right? Like, because that's where you kind of start. I know that that's where I've started with projects. Like, I would love to collaborate with these musicians, and I think it would be super fun. And but then as you do it, you experience what the impact of it is onto others. And so I know that this happened in this case. So I'd love to hear about how it's evolved from, going to campsites and playing to where you're going now.
sure. So I think it was the feedback that very first year. We asked for people to leave comments after the shows. Just write on little. We provided little 3x5 cards, and as people handed back their headphones, we asked them to take the time to just write something about their experience. And the kind of feedback that we received was really incredible and powerful. And people were saying that it was like top 10 experiences of their life, and like these really big, meaningful statements that I was surprised by. Um, and I think, I think I had kind of underestimated the power of this music and the combination of playing this music in these inspiring settings. And so I don't think people are necessarily responding to me personally playing. I think people are responding to the like that space, and kind of giving what I feel like I do is I give people the permission and a reason to just be present
Mm,
in nature. And the music is kind of like a little guide, and they can do whatever they want. They can wander around, they can lie down they can climb a tree. And so it's it's sort of this free space.
mm,
And usually when we go, if we go see a waterfall or we go on a hike, we like hike to the top of the hill, we take a picture, we maybe hang out, have lunch, and then we go.
yeah.
um, but it's usually that like moment of arrival is usually short. And I think that this is this is kind of like an hour-long moment of arrival where people get to just be present in a place. And so they after they start to notice little things, and the music um, gives everything sort of a meaning. And because so if like I'm um, like if I'm playing Ondine by Ravel and I ask people to go take off their shoes and go put their feet in the river, the way that the ripples move, and the fact that everybody's listening to the same thing and they're all experiencing that feeling of the river together, I think that it's 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 powerful to be like witness to the incredible complexity and beauty of nature, but also to be sharing those experiences and that music with other people. Um, and I can't even remember what the question was. Uh, oh, it was about kind of the evolution
Yeah.
of what the project means. And so it was hearing that feedback, hearing about people's experience wandering, and different things that they discover through the music or through being in nature that that kind of I mean, it made me feel like this is important, and it also made me kind of fall in love with music again. And it's, now when I practice, I imagine, like, in a certain movement, I'll think about, like, if a squirrel's like running up a tree, or I don't know. They're just like little stories that I tell myself that I think have now had an impact on how I practice, and it all feels a little bit more magical now.
Wow, that's so great. Oh my gosh. I mean, you're making me want to go to a concert immediately. Like next time I'm on the West Coast, I have to make sure that I know what your schedule is so that I can experience this. I always tell people, and I know this is like um just kind of a, random fact, but I always tell people that haven't been to an orchestra concert. If there's one concert you should go to, it's a piano concerto. Like to see a pianist playing, I just think I've always been, you know, just really wowed by what you can do as when you get to that level playing piano because it's so physical and then you can see everything that's happening because it's right there in front of you with your fingers and all the keys. You can see everything. And so but then to take this to the next level and everything that you said about getting there, lengthening and enjoying that arrival point in nature, because I totally relate to that. When you go to a beautiful place, you sort of get there and then you're like, I'm here. All right, this is beautiful.
Yeah,
Like, what am I supposed to do now? It's quiet, look at it, appreciate it. But this is like, because music really is like time. It's like, It's
yeah.
like this is time passing in an audible way. And so you're creating that framework for people in a beautiful setting. So that's really exciting. What's like one of your favorite concerts you've ever done?
That is a tough question. I love it's. I think at the beginning I expected a lot from the sort of celebrity sites like Crater Lake National Park and Smith Rock, and those sites absolutely deliver. But sometimes it's the county park that where something just incredible happens.
Mm,
And it really, for me, my favorite concerts are the ones where the community is really invested and involved. Um, and I think that's a huge part of, like, the success of this project, is that we don't just sort of roll up and do a show.
mm-hmm,
It's really about spending the year building relationships and identifying communities that want this event,
mm,
and then we work together to figure out how we can make it happen. So a great example of that is um, a little town in Washington called Starbuck in Dayton County, and uh, a fellow had been uh, camping and backpacking up in Steens Mountain, and came across other folks that had just been to a concert of mine at the Alvord Desert, and he had this idea to bring it up to Starbuck, which I think the population is maybe 110 or 120.
wow.
It's a small town. Used to be on the rail line. Then there was a dam on the river that nearby that sort of created some economic buzz, and now there's a new paper or a straw mill um, that just has opened up, and so he kind of wanted to bring the community together to have this, to be part of this concert. So he brought me to town. He arranged a breakfast with nine of the people that he thought were important to meet with. Everybody from the mayor to the pastor to the woman who runs the amazing little restaurant, sort of bakery in town, and just gathered this group together. I kind of explained the project, and then asked essentially if the community would want to have that. And through conversation, they also identified that one of the things that, like, material things that they need was a new water tower. So we came up with this plan that, anything that we raised beyond what In a Landscape needed to present the concert there, we would give back to the town, and write a check to the mayor that would go toward a new water tower. And so, um, this fellow who, his name's Mort Bishop, and he really like went. He took this project and made it his mission to make it more than just a concert. And he went around and got, sponsorships from all different kinds of people, individuals, and companies. Uh, and then when the concert happened, it was in the old rodeo grounds right in town, and people came on horseback. They listened to they were, traipsing around on horses with their headphones.
Wow.
People, the straw company built like this big hay, straw bales so people could sit on, and they had shade. People walked up like miles up up the valley with their headphones, and sort of overlook the town and the valley. And it was this incredible mix of, matrons from Portland, and cowboys and ranchers, and people that have lived for generations in that community. We had cowboy poets read this, grandfather and grandson duo, which was just so awesome. And then I was able to present a check to the town for $3,000, which made the difference for them to be able to get a new water tower.
Wow.
Um, and so it was just like, it was this beautiful kind of coming together of people. A lot of people wouldn't otherwise gather to listen to a piano recital. That just sounds like not something that's super engaging. But because it was a community event, because we sort of got the feedback from the community, it became something that people were proud of and that they wanted to be a part of. And that was so. Concerts like that are just like tremendously satisfying.
Oh my gosh, I can imagine. And it also makes me think differently about how musicians can go about creating their own concerts in that way. Like how much more powerful it is when you get a community behind what you're doing for a reason and for a connection and it's really all the work that you're doing. So, would you say that the community piece is another part of how it's evolved for you? Because, I mean, maybe you didn't necessarily see that was going to be part of what you're doing when you initially thought of the concerts outside.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it's definitely become what seems like the main, the most compelling part of this project is about creating community and bringing people, especially bringing people, that otherwise wouldn't be in the same place
Yeah.
together to share an experience. I love, looking out and seeing, uh, seeing cowboys, and like having conversations with like hipsters from Eugene. It's so it's so important right now to be in spaces that encourage conversation, and that, like, I can't really think of another setting in which those two people would be, you know,
Yeah.
would be in the same place and where there's space to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's that, like, it's hard to measure what the impact is. But I think, if we continue to partner with local historical societies and engage with community leaders to identify needs in communities, it's winning. And people want to feel heard, and so when we can maybe bring some urban folks to a rural community, and give people the opportunity in like a non-political environment to just talk and relate and realize that we all have a lot in common. um, it goes a long way, and I think has the potential to have an impact that is profound and not, but maybe not measurable.
Right. And also something that you probably couldn't have thought of by yourself, that it would have this effect either before you started. That's the other super inspiring piece about what you're doing. I love the idea of bringing people together from, in the world that we live in where you can really stay mentally in the same in like the in a closed area of with people who see the world exactly the same way as you do, with how the news is and even how cities are, and so I feel like that's so inspiring and so needed in our world to be able to bring people together in that way, because how else is it going to happen except through art and music, really.
Yeah, yeah, and people take it's a new concept for a lot of people, and what I really appreciate is that people take the risk to come and see what it's like.
Yeah.
Uh, and they I mean, for we've had thousands of people that have never been to a piano concert, never been to a classical music concert, and they take the risk of coming. And I think the reason they take the risk is because we remove barriers to access, like money, a certain dress code or expected behavior,
Mm-hmm.
and we also bring it to them. We 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 perform in places that people have relationships with.
Yeah.
So if it's a place that they always go hiking or they regularly go fishing, or it's just it's part of their lives already. So going back there for another event is not so much of a
It's
reach,
not so
but they
foreign.
still,
Exactly. Because like the idea of how are we going to get more people to listen to this dying art of classical music? The age-old sort of argument. But exactly what you just said, like they already have a relationship with the space. So it's not such a far
yeah,
reach to go there again and hear something.
yeah,
I
exactly.
love that. Wow. So, one of the things that everyone wants to know that both people that I work with and just the conversation around what's happening in my, in what I talk about on my page and everything is audience building. And especially not just online audience building. You've already talked about like physically how you're building audience. And I love some of these ideas of really engaging and connecting with the community. I think that's really, really awesome and so needed. How have you built the audience online so that you can further um, you know, your message about what you're doing?
Um, we haven't done a great job of that. I think we've been so focused on actual people like
Mm-hmm.
coming to events that uh, we have like a tiny social media following, and we don't do any real advertising. I think, um, but we would. I mean, I would love to do that, and I think there is a tremendous opportunity to bring, whether it's bringing these experiences to people that are less able through virtual reality or some other immersive technology, or or sharing stories of particular people in landscapes, that maybe could serve as an example to other rural communities.
Yeah.
I think we have the potential to be doing more storytelling, but that hasn't been a priority, and it kind of hasn't happened. It happens sort of by mostly through word of mouth still.
Mm-hmm.
We did have some we were written about in the LA Times, and then the producers at CBS this morning heard about it, so they came in out from New York and came to a show and made a 6-minute special, which was on CBS this
That's
morning and CBS
awesome.
News, and so we had some national exposure through that, but it didn't it sort of still translated. Um, it didn't really translate to followers. We got thousands of emails sort of saying, "Hey, can you come here
Mm.
and here and here and here?" Um, and I think people love the idea, but we haven't yet really figured out how to tell how to tell the stories of the places, or how to translate the experience to more people online.
Right.
So don't really I couldn't say that I have figured that one out.
But the cool part is that in real life, you're doing all this amazing work. So when you do decide to sort of funnel it into a content for what you're going to do online, you'll have so many things. Um,
Yeah, I think yeah, content is not something we will be
Right.
needing.
You'll have beautiful photography. You'll have tons of people who
Yeah,
are excited about what just happened. Like that's a recipe for, you know, any kind of success that you want to have. And the reason why I love using social media for that is just because then more people can find out about it, which is always a good thing. But yeah, so
right.
you probably do have a lot of people like, hey, can you do it here? Can you do it there? Do you have any plans to expand past the West Coast?
Um, we have some ideas, but we're gonna, at least for the next year, we're gonna stay focused. Focused mostly in Oregon. Maybe do a couple more in Washington and California. But what I would say 3 years ago I would have thought after Oregon, then we'll go all over the country, and then we'll go all over the world. But I think the more I learn about communities in Oregon, the more I realize I want to learn.
Mm,
And I think there's an opportunity to just have, like, as we've gone back to the same places multiple years, we have now relationships with people,
yeah.
uh, and and like to see people that were that were skeptical the first year. Now by year 3, they're like owning it and bringing all their friends.
Wow.
And uh, so we I don't really know how we're gonna grow. We already kind of struggle with we limit our concerts to quite a small audience of never really over 300, and some of them, like last year, a couple of them sold out within hours. And so how do we deal with making them accessible to locals, but also you know also something that where we still continue to grow our audience. And
Yeah.
I think that's going to be a challenge, the more exposure we get, especially online.
Right. You have one of those good problems, right? That you don't want to grow too fast or that you can't keep up with maybe the interest at
Yeah,
times. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
but it's not, I mean, it's not a bad problem to have because obviously you've proven that people want it.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what I'd like to prove next is that it's not dependent on me. It's really about the music and communities and nature. And
Mm.
I think the more people, um, if we try it with other musicians or uh, other landscapes, I think as long as the heart is in the right place, it's the performer is just a vehicle. Is just a kind of the mechanism for the music making, and it's the music that's kind of really the guide to the experience.
That's so beautiful. That's really beautiful. So do you have like, I know you've given some really great, awesome insights into how you've created this, but if you had like, you know, a tidbit of advice for someone who wants to create something that's more unique, that maybe on paper or in your mind seems undoable because you've clearly created something that, people would say, oh, that's not possible if they, heard about it or whatever, if they didn't know it was existing already. Um, for people that have big ideas like that, like you have, that you've made come true, what advice do you have for, like, if you could just sum up like something that a word of advice for people?
Um, I think I think grants are a great place to start. I think starting small, uh, and just testing out ideas and following through. I also I would say patience is something that certainly didn't come naturally to me. I thought by year 3 we'd just have people throwing that. I mean, just part of me thought we would be famous, and like I'd be able to do whatever I wanted and go wherever I wanted. And it's been a much like slower. I mean, we've been so successful, and I'm super grateful for that. Um, but it's a slower process than my kind of, overnight. I think then it's a slower process than I've expected in a way, and I think part of it is just being conditioned you know, by the idea of going viral,
Right.
and seeing so many stories of, like, there are some other stories out there of people that are doing similar things that, well, there was like this one video of an Audi performing on a what looks like an iceberg, and he wrote a piece, um, and he's sort of playing on a piano floating through the icebergs, um, and it's it gets like millions and millions of views, and I think it's sometimes a little bit discouraging because I think like why don't I have that kind of uh why isn't what I'm doing seen to be as successful when it seems like I hate to compare because I think what he's doing is incredibly valuable, um, but I don't know. I guess just being patient
Yeah.
and staying focused on the work and not comparing oneself uh, to the success stories that are
Ugh,
constantly bombarding our feeds.
so true.
Um,
Yeah.
it yeah, it can be so discouraging, and there's this expectation to be famous and to have um, to be making money, and I guess I would say just surround yourself with people that believe in you, that can it does take support, um, but it also just takes action, and it takes like deliberate deliberate action and following through, and no matter what project, like I did multiple projects that I thought would be that were successful, like in San Francisco produced a sort of weird crazy experimental play. In London, got an award to do another like classical music kind of theater piece, and and started a company in London to try and do more of that, and things just the stars didn't align, and they didn't have a life beyond that beautiful moment. And I think under being patient with yourself, that and knowing that even if you think you have a great idea, to do it and then learn from it, and maybe the next thing is piggybacks off of that idea, maybe the next thing is totally different, but to just keep working and to keep making, and yeah, keep going.
That's so great. And it's true. Like when our fast-paced social media, Instagram world, you can see something that's gone viral and think, "Oh my God, like I'm not keeping up or this isn't happening fast enough." And without knowing the person's story behind it or how long it took them to get there. And I've had a lot of
Yeah.
conversations with people on this podcast where they tell that story of like it took so many, like one of the people that I interviewed, Two Set Violin. I don't know if you know those guys. They're Australian violinists who have this like comedy thing that they do, and they've had viral videos with millions of views, but they talked about how many videos they put out for years before they got that. You know what I mean? So like,
Mm. Yeah.
but if you discover them today, you're like, oh my God, these guys are going viral. Like, um, you don't get to hear that backstory. So that's so
Right.
important to remember and keep yourself in check about because it's so easy to compare yourself. And then that,
Yeah, and I think
yeah,
it makes the product better. Like, the Beatles performed thousands and thousands of times before they were
yeah,
famous. We I think that sometimes fame comes too soon, and then you stop having to be critical and make your product
yeah.
better. And in many ways, I'm grateful to have had this project grow slowly, because if I was sponsored by Red Bull in year 2 and I got to helicopter the piano to base camp of Everest, like I wouldn't be doing the same community work. It would be an entirely different, probably awesome project, but it's it's different, and it's humbling.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and plus it gave the project space to evolve in that way, like you said, with the community engagement and everything else, and it's really impactful. And over time, more and more people I know are gonna find out about what you're doing, and I mean, I just think it's great. So who do you look to for inspiration in your world, in the music world, general or classical music, or like, is there anybody out there who's really inspiring you?
Um, yeah, I mean, yes. Um, I think there's inspiration all around. I think, I mean, my partner Thomas and his band Pink Martini are inspiring because they've always had this idea of inclusion
Hmm.
and of, you know, he, Thomas does, he works on projects that are, and he challenges all of his collaborators to do something new and meaningful.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of times, I think, especially in America, we allow ourselves to just do things because they're new and not necessarily work through that process of making it great.
Hmm.
Because to make something good is hard. To make something great is like, it's harder, but it's not that much harder. It just takes being critical and it's time and process. So I look to, to Thomas and Pink Martini. I think that the different, like all of the, one of the kind of magical things and wonderful things about now is that established organizations like, the ballet and symphonies and art museums, they're all having to challenge to challenge the way audiences engage with them. And so there's a lot of there's a lot of risk taking and a lot of flops, but a lot of risk taking, which is inspiring. It's inspiring to see age old institutions taking chances on young artists, on living artists, um, on things that 20 years ago would have been just, there wouldn't have been that same sort of urgency to take risks. And then I think it's amazing that institutions like where I did my master's, Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, they were really, and I think other conservatories and universities are doing this as well in their performing arts departments, is, you know looking more at collaborative arts as a way forward, and teaching entrepreneurship skills, and looking at looking being self-reflective and looking at what is the role of a musician today, and
Yes.
how can, instead of just making musicians, how can we make artists that are not being bred to become competition winners and teachers, but to become active active artists in a way that reflect the needs of society, and challenge other people to be reflective, and create beauty and create magical moments of coming together. And I think that there's a zeitgeist in institutions now that is inspiring, and it's amazing to see resources being directed and sort of what feels like paving a way for a new generation of dynamic artists. And so those are the kinds of things that I see and I'm super inspired by.
I love that. And you know what? You're right. There's something happening in our space, and things are changing. And you know, I love that you brought up Thomas because I'm continually inspired by him and the work that he does with Pink Martini and his collaborators and the things that he does to evolve and keep Pink Martini relevant, um, because they just keep doing better and better, but yet they've been doing it for a really long time. Like that is so inspiring, and probably a big part of why he can say, no, this is the vision, like having somebody like that in your presence is super powerful. And then you're so right about all the things that are changing and evolving in classical music and music education, and paving the way to have more musicians like you who are willing to take risks and do really amazing things to impact not just classical music itself and to keep this genre alive, but like to impact the world and the community. Like to have more musicians thinking like that is really what I
Hmm.
find so inspiring about what you just said and who you are and what you're doing. So I'm excited and I'm thrilled that you're right here talking to me right now about all this.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. It's fun to talk about, and it's I think I think I'm excited to see how this project in a landscape grows, just to see what kind of amazing things institutions and people start to produce. It's going to be it's such a weird time. I mean, it's probably always a weird time, but it feels like a weird time, and so I hope to see some really weird, challenging art coming in the years to come.
I do too. So if someone wants to come and see your concert, how do they? I'm sure it's listed on your website.
Yeah. So inalandscape.org is the project website. HunterNoack.com will also take you there.
Okay.
I have Instagram, both in a landscape and Hunter Noack. It's Noack.
Okay.
And Instagram, Facebook, kind of. I guess that's it. And the best way is probably to go to the inalandscape.org, sign up for the mailing list, and then we'll send out a notification when the 2020 season is announced, and others, we'll be doing other special events and collaborations throughout the year.
So great. I'm going to link all those things in the show notes, so it'll be super easy to find it. Thank you so much, Hunter. I am so thrilled to have this conversation. I really appreciate you being on today.
It's totally my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm Tracy Friedlander, and you've been listening to the Crushing Classical podcast. You can follow Crushing Classical on Instagram and Facebook at Crushing Classical. If you haven't yet, you can go to Apple Podcast and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Your reviews help others to find these conversations. Thanks for listening.